George asked over on Facebook, how do we interpret all the contradictory findings? That's a great question, George. It can be really hard and really frustrating when you've got two awesome pieces of research about the same topic, but they're telling you contradictory things. In this video, let's break down some tips and tricks to help you navigate that sticky situation. Hi friends, I'm Matthew Courtney and I help schools help kids. And here we talk all about evidence-informed school improvement. So if you're into that, make sure you like and subscribe and follow from wherever you're watching and come join our community of improvers. All right, let's get right into it. Here are some practical tips for helping you navigate contradictory research findings. First, consider study quality. Not all research is the same, and different researchers will use different methodologies in different contexts, and those more rigorous methodologies can help us to eliminate bias. So if you have two pieces of research that are very different, that have very contradictory findings, and you need to kind of weed out one or the other to help inform your decision-making process, a great way to do that is to weed out based on the rigor and the quality of the study. So really dive deep into those methodology sections of your papers and try to understand the steps that those researchers took in order to eliminate bias. Things that make a study a little higher quality than another study might be a large sample size, might be clear steps for replication, a clear and transparent discussion on the limitations of that study. And also, we might want to consider the design of the study. Is it a randomized control trial where we've sorted kids randomly into groups? Or is it a correlational study where we've kind of taken data after the fact and examined the strength of relationship? Next, consider the context between the two studies. In educational decision-making, it is really important that you take research and you consider it within your local context. Remember, we always want to be working with research that was conducted with kids like ours and in schools like ours. And so if we're looking at two pieces of research, and maybe I'm in a small rural elementary school, and I'm looking at one study that was conducted in a small rural elementary and one that was conducted in a large urban high school, that contextual difference might help me to process the contradictions between these two findings a little differently. If it worked in the high school and it didn't work in the elementary, and I'm in the elementary, then that helps me know this intervention probably is not for me. You could also try to look for a meta-analysis. If you're working with your intervention and you're finding that the literature is just all over the place, a great step is to find a meta-analysis on that intervention. In a meta-analysis, the researcher has pulled together as much literature as they can find, and they've used statistical processes to create sort of a master effect size, really to help you understand the differences between all of these contradictory findings and how they mesh together. This statistical process can give us a better idea and a better understanding of how an intervention can work when the body of research is kind of all over the place. Look for confounding factors. Confounding factors are elements of a research study that might introduce bias or skew the results. These are extremely common in quasi-experimental studies where we use previously assigned groups of students, especially in education, because we have lots of previously assigned groups of students. We call them schools and classrooms. To examine those confounding factors, it's really helpful to think about what's the same and what's different in those two groups. Let's take, for example, two classrooms. Let's say that I do a study where I do an intervention in Miss Napier's classroom, but not in Miss Foster's classroom. And at the end of the cycle, I do some analysis to see which class did better. That would be a quasi-experimental design. But what if I do not control for the factors that exist in those two classrooms? Maybe Miss Foster spent 20 years as a special education teacher before moving into 5th grade where she is now. Those 20 years of experience are going to make her classroom different than Miss Napier's classroom because she has a different background, a different set of experiences. And that is a confounding factor that makes my analysis a little less reliable. If you're really struggling to make sense of the literature, try working with a knowledge broker. Knowledge brokers are professionals that specialize in translating research and connecting researchers to practice and practitioners to researchers. By finding a knowledge broker in your community who you can build a relationship with, they can help you interpret those study findings and get to the root cause, get to a possible solution a little bit faster. You can probably find a knowledge broker at your local institute of higher education, your university college, or especially community colleges. Also, check with your library. You might have access to a great research librarian who's able to help synthesize information for you. Finally, check online. There are consultants like myself all over the country who work with schools, who work with leaders to help them synthesize research into new contextualized information for decision making. So, build a relationship with a knowledge broker and really speed up your evidence process. Finally, remember that contradiction is part of the process. Contradictory study findings are a normal part of the research process. They're not a red flag, and they're not something that should turn you off from trying out a new intervention that you want to try. Contradictory findings are a normal part of the scientific process. They are not a red flag, and they should not turn you away from an intervention that your gut is telling you is really going to work. Remember, when we've synthesized all that information and we've made an evidence informed decision, we need to go for it and really try to implement that with fidelity. Don't let a contradiction turn you away. Contradictory findings are actually great for research because they stimulate the research body and they help future researchers make better decisions about the kinds of studies they're going to design and the kind of interventions that they want to explore. So don't let that turn you away. Embrace those contradictions and work through them. George, I hope that this has been a valuable video and I've addressed your questions. If you have a question about evidence-based decision-making in education that you'd like me to address in a future video, drop it in the comments below and I'll add it to the queue. And if you'd like some extra guidance on evidence-based decision-making in education, check out my Evidence-Empowered Educator program at www.matthewbcourtney.com/coaching.